Welcome to What Drives You with your host, Mike Gourdet. Human solution consultant from Seattle, Washington. It is now time to sit back, buckle up for the show that drives the asking question of what drives you. And now your host, Mike Gourdet.
And welcome to this week's episode of What Drives You, the show about why we do the things we do. Today, we're going to be talking with Jillian Weber, and we're going to be talking about a topic that might be uncomfortable for you. So we're going to talk about some sexual trauma issues. So if that's uncomfortable for you, just be warned that that's what we're going to be talking about here in a minute. Today, after that, we're going to be talking about congruity, consistency, and cognitive dissonance. And then we will have our question of the day. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with Jillian. And welcome back to What Drives You, the interview. Today, I'm with Jillian Weber of Harmonizing Habits, Health and Life Coaching. Hi, Jillian.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. How are you doing today?
Absolutely terrific.
Great. I understand you are in the great state of Kentucky.
That's correct.
All right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into the questions and let you roll on your mission.
All right. Well, I am a newly retired Army soldier of 20 years. My husband and I both retired at the same time. Mm-hmm. And coming out of the military, it was 31 July was our last day, and we had lots of plans and intentions that, of course, as happened with most people, COVID threw the little wrench in our plans.
Yeah.
Yep. So I initially had intended to start the health and life coaching business along with speaking publicly on stages, and mm-hmm. I had a large stage that I had planned, and with COVID, they canceled that.
Right.
So I know, right? So I'm currently, learning the online side of everything. And really my drive right now is my focus on helping victims of sexual assault become survivors. And I'm doing that through the first responders, because that's really the easiest and best way to get the masses that go through these traumatic incidents. So that's my focus right now, is really, I teach through my own story, as mm-hmm. One of our programs that we both have says, turn your mess into a message.
Right.
So I'm looking to I had 2 military sexual assaults that I went through, and I'm trying to take the lessons that I learned after being able to step out of my box, step away from the personal part of it, look back at what happened, mm-hmm. and identify all the key indicators of what got me there, why I was targeted, why I responded the way I responded, both mentally and physically. Mm-hmm. Take that and just educate the world on the fact that sexual assault and rape is more than just, I think, the cliche college boys getting drunk and taking advantage of a girl kind of thing. It happens to both genders. It happens from, people that it happens without alcohol. It happens to the tomboy tough girls like me that thought no one could ever do it to me.
Right.
So.
Right. So. And if you don't mind my asking, how long have you been putting this together?
Well, I've been working with it and putting it together in the Army for over about 6 years now, and mm-hmm. I've been teaching victim advocates and actually soldiers for over 6 years. I didn't branch out of the military because, as most people probably know, the military doesn't look kindly on soldiers themselves demonstrating or showing the dark side of the programs and the Army, but so I stayed within the Army. But now that I'm out, I really want to branch out and share it with many more people than that small group.
Okay, and we talked a little bit earlier about you actually have a life coaching business, but this really is your passion, right? That would be my normal first question. This is your passion.
This is wholeheartedly my passion, and although I still coach right now, my focus is really trying to get my message out there and really bring people on my journey of helping victims become survivors. That's really that key sentence there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's the passion.
That's the passion. And this may seem like an oxymoron, but what drives that?
So honestly, what drives the passion is it started off after my second sexual assault. My first sexual assault was don't get me wrong, it was horrible, but one of the worst parts of it was the backlash of rumors that came about after the sexual assault. And I lived with those rumors. If you don't know, the military is less than 1% of the US population.
Yes.
And then narrow that down to, I was in the intelligence field.
Okay.
So now I'm in this small little group and niche of people that it didn't matter if I moved to another state when I changed duty stations. It didn't matter when I got married and changed my name. If I ran into, and it was typically females, if I ran into a female from that first duty assignment that knew about some of the things that happened to me after the first sexual assault,
mm-hmm.
rumors would spike again.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that made its way into the second sexual assault. So with the second sexual assault, I ended up in a 6-month-long course. And while I was there, my husband at the time, he had to move to a new duty assignment while I was in his training. Mm-hmm. And when he did so, he kind of just poof, disappeared. I didn't know if he was alive or dead. And so after that happened, I went to my command after about a week of not hearing anything from him. And I went to the command and I said, hey, I need help. I don't know where he's at or what happened to him, because he was military as well. And I kind of got that laughing attitude of, oh, well, he's obviously just trying to get a break from you, and we're not going to disturb that. So they wouldn't help me. And in addition to that, they didn't just not help me, they ended up spreading a lot of rumors themselves. So they started spreading rumors that I was this slutty girl, which of course brought me back to the first sexual assault mentally. Mm-hmm. And then what it also did is it set me up as a target for the predator that was in my training with me. Because if everybody already thought one way around me and about me, and most of that was coming from the command, who would be the people you report to, right, if you're going to report at the time, then nobody's going to believe me. And so I was this absolute perfect target for him. And so after going through the sexual assault and learning later on how my leadership played the role of making me this perfect target, I started my training because I was in a bunch of units where rumors started flying about everybody else, and a lot of them, about people's sexual history or what they were not doing. And I actually broke my first training by actually training on rumors. And I had half the classroom saying how much they cared about that rumors meant something, we need to stop it, and the other half being like these tough sergeant major types that were like, oh well, sticks and stones, you just need to move on. And that's when I out of nowhere, I just came out with it. I was like, no, because this is what it does.
Mhm.
And the room was speechless. Just nobody could talk. Nobody was ready for that. And yeah, I wasn't ready for it. I just did it. And it was one of those things where I realized, one, that as I was teaching and talking about it, I was healing.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, I had a lot of people come up to me and tell me thank you. And there were some thank yous that I got, not so much because I just shared when I was open, but because they had been there too.
Right.
And so that drove me further. And so my next big training was in front of, it was about 200 captains and above, and master and above. And if you know those ranks, those are all your higher echelon ranking people. Those are your managers.
Right.
And in this particular instance, I had been sitting through sexual assault and sexual harassment training for so long. And as a victim, hearing the dumb questions and stuff that people come up with, and like, it's triggering, and you're just like, ah. So I thought about it, and I was like, if I can do a training for a lot of these leaders, because a lot of times the leaders that were making these questions, if I can do a training that would allow people to ask the deep questions that they really want to know about what goes on, so they can get rid of those false ideas about rape. Like the numbers, like the one question I get all the time is, well, what about false reporters? And false reporters being this huge number of people, and it's really not. And so I have to explain a lot of things about that, and why, for instance, in my case, a lot of people looked at my scenario as a false report, or like I wasn't really assaulted, because in my assault, I did what they call collapsed immobility, which once my brain realized what was going on, I black out, complete blackout.
Yep.
Well, the way people look at that is, well, but you didn't say no and you didn't fight back. So was it really rape?
Right. Yeah. That's, yeah. You're not off the mark there.
So
all the time.
So as questions started coming up and people started opening up and getting these questions out, I realized that the more they asked me these questions, the less they had an opinion when a victim did come forward that was maybe inappropriate, and the less they asked victims, oftentimes when they're reporting the wrong question that really just additionally victimizes them again because of the type of question people are asking. And so again, I was driven a little bit further. And every time I taught a training, I realized how much I was helping other victims and first responders that are going to deal with victims, and leadership that were going to deal with victims. And it was just a little bit of a weight lifted off my shoulders. So there is a little bit of that selfishness to it, where it really brought healing to me to teach and help.
Okay.
And so that's what drove me. That really is what has made me just keep going.
Okay. So it's your hope that now that you're in the civilian world, that you can, you're teaching first responders so that they can help the victim, right, and try to ease them into not being re-traumatized over and over again, because that's one of the big problems with sexual trauma is that the victim is often re-victimized over and over again because of the way the court system is, because of the way the invasive questions, going to the hospital, all that other stuff. So is it your goal to mitigate those re-traumatizations?
To mitigate it, and then additionally through my story, and as I teach my story, I try and get people to see where I didn't get the help I should have gotten. And not necessarily because I didn't go search it out, but because either I didn't know about it or because people weren't helping me. it went as deep as like the doctors. When I had to go get a medical examination for the first sexual assault because I got injured during it, I literally stood there in front of this doctor crying.
Mhm.
And the doctor never once asked me what happened. She never, tried to help me out, never tried to console me, nothing. I got these cold, dead eyes.
Yeah.
So from doctors to leadership to, all sorts of people throughout the process that should have been there to help me. My goal is if I can teach and show people through the program where had somebody been there,
Mhm.
I would have maybe gone this way or I would have gone that way.
Yeah.
And honestly, go ahead.
The military has been notoriously slow on the uptake when it comes to care of their charges in systems like these and other things like PTSD. They've been very, very slow in understanding and helping out with that. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, in one of the things I'll say is the past, very particularly, because at the last 6 years of my military service, I actually got into all the sexual assault programs, and I played a role in all those programs, from victim advocate to a sexual assault response coordinator. And I did everything I could to help build that program. And I will say, compared to what I've seen, in my last duty assignment, I worked with both active duty and National Guard and Reserve. And so with the National Guard Reserve, what I saw a lot of is we would give them victim advocacy, of course, if something happened to them off duty hours. But if it happened off duty hours, like the military police, they didn't have any jurisdiction. They couldn't do anything over it. So I got to see how the civilian world handled it versus now how the military world handles it. And granted, a lot of it is because of news coverage. A lot of it is because of publicity that happened that showed, how bad we are, sweeping things under the rug and stuff like that. And I'm never going to say it's perfect. But what I will say and appreciate is that the Army, after a couple of years after I went through my last sexual assault, really changed their program, and they started focusing on the victims, not so much on the process of, putting somebody in jail, which that's still there.
Mm-hmm.
But they actually, the program itself that I was in was for the victims. Now, I was still there to guide and direct commands and the legal personnel to ensure that they were doing what they were supposed to do. But there were two separate entities, whereas before this one entity that helps victim move forward and get counseling and get everything that they need, that wasn't there. They now have programs for the victims to have special legal counsel, which they didn't have before. So we've grown and developed as an Army, which has been awesome. I still want it to move forward. I hope that, they don't stop where they're at, because I think they could really accomplish great things.
Well,
but yeah. But there's one other large piece to this, and it's not just re-victimization, like you noted. A large majority of victims are not just a victim of sexual assault once. They've usually had it happen more than once, often 4 or 5 times. And one of the key reasons of that is because they don't get the care and the help that they need after the first one. And so the brain creates certain psychological tendencies that ends up making them very good targets for future predators.
Yeah, adaptive behavior.
Mm-hmm. And, for anybody who knows anything about predators, especially for sexual assault, it's not about sex 90% of the time. It's about power. Mm-hmm. And the majority of them, it's not their first time. They've sexually assaulted people on multiple occasions. And so they know how to target.
Right.
And that's another part of my training, is to explain how they target different victims, and how the environment and the people around you play a role in that. And that's another thing that I really kind of usually get a big response on, is because a lot of people don't understand how their day-to-day attitude actually plays a part in how predators target.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's a big it's comprised of a lot of different pieces. I try and hit the whole thing in my journey that I'm on. It's not just, one section of helping a victim move forward directly. It's also, like I said, getting those first responders to help in the right places, getting friends and family to understand. It's as simple as, and this comes into, with suicide and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you paying attention to the people around you? Are they acting differently? Those people close to me should have seen. I went, especially my second sexual assault, I went from being a very happy-go-lucky, joking kind of person. I was, never afraid to tell my feelings or emotions, to complete robot. No emotions. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. I was literally just robot. No emotions.
Yeah. That's the safe place. Right?
It was, and nobody noticed, though.
Yeah. I understand that. And
yeah,
it can be very frustrating when that kind of stuff happens, and we expect other people to understand our situation, and they just sort of, they don't make any connections there. It's kind of a strange dynamic sometimes.
Yep.
So,
and it's not that they don't love or care about you, those people that are close to you. It's just, we're so quick to just brush things off, and not wanting to talk about the bad things, and not wanting to, a lot of people just never wanted to see me as a victim. They never wanted to see me as somebody that could be harmed that way. And so they just kind of pretended like it didn't happen. Even when I started talking about it, a lot of the people that knew me were just kind of like, oh yeah, that's good. Okay. Different topic, please.
Yeah, it makes them uncomfortable, and they can't relate, and it's very difficult for them to empathize with what's going on. So that response you're talking about is just they clamp down and want to go back to that surface level engagement. So yeah, it can be super tough. So
it is. I think the most difficult part is, once somebody has an idea of how this one topic in their life is supposed to be and is, when you break that barrier, there is that initial rejection and pushback. And so when you have somebody like me that was a victim that can sit there and just blatantly, hey, look, I'm giving you the brutal truth. You're not hearing it from a statistic. You're not hearing it from, some random teacher in a schoolhouse. I'm giving it to you, the down and dirty. That's where I can break that barrier, and there is no pushback, because at that point they're like,
they don't really
crap.
They don't have any arguments, right?
Right. They'll have questions. There are a lot of questions, and I used to think of them as stupid questions, and now I look at them as just honest questions. They're just people that haven't had experiences around that, or they've had a different type of experience. And so, I'm like, hey, I bear all. Somebody has to, so that we can learn about it. You ask the question, I'm going to answer.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So we're just about out of time. Is there some final thoughts that you would like to share?
I think the biggest thing is just to remember that if you know somebody who has gone through it or possibly gone through a sexual assault, that literally every little person that plays a role in that victim's life
Mm-hmm.
can make or break it. You know, it can be from suicide because they can't handle it, because just no one asked them how they were doing,
Mm-hmm.
to very risque behavior. I will tell you, when I went through my second one and I did the whole robot thing, somebody asked me if I wanted to go skydiving. I will tell you, I would have thought twice about that. At this point, I didn't. And luckily it was skydiving with a, good company that had good ratings. And that's, but there was a lot of other things I could have done because there was nobody there to from leadership to counselors to friends. There was just nobody taking that role. So if you know that somebody's gone through that, or if somebody's acting differently, just understand that ignoring it doesn't work. Trying to pretend like nothing's happened doesn't work. Find out the best way. Call advocacy services and find out the best way that you can play a role in that person's life to help them become, a survivor instead of a victim. Because feeling like a victim forever and always feeling like you have no power anymore and all that it really does drive people to some very bad places.
Yes, it can. Very much so.
Yeah. And the only other thing other than that is, and I kind of feel like this about everything, there's always two sides to each story. And I've always said that the truth is somewhere in the middle. However, be gentle with your judgments or your thoughts when it comes to anything around sexual assault. And I will never be the person that jumps in there and says, always believe, one side over the other, because I do believe everybody, the justice system, should work and everybody should get a chance at that. But it's about how we talk to those people that are reporting, because if at any wee chance or form they, take it the wrong way, again, you've just set them back in any progress they might have made.
Right. Okay. So if anybody would like any information from you, do you have a website that they can go to?
I do. There's two main platforms that I use. I've got, you can just look me up under Jillian Weber on LinkedIn, or I've got my Facebook site, which is the Harmonizing Habits, Health and Life Coaching.
Okay. So I will put that in the links for you. So thank you for joining us. We do have these heavy topics every once in a while, but I do think they're very necessary. And I appreciate you sharing your story with us. Good luck to you in that endeavor, because I know that's an area that can certainly use some shoring up in.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Not a problem. We're going to be taking a quick break. We'll be right back. Thanks again, Jillian. We'll be back with the main segment, so stick around. And thanks again, Jillian, for joining us. I hope you found that informative, even though it was an uncomfortable subject. We're going to talk today about the psychology of congruence. Congruence is a term that Carl Rogers, who is a humanistic psychologist, used to describe how our ideal self wants to align with our experiences. In more recent literature, Robert Cialdini talks about this in the Psychology of Persuasion, in that human beings want to have their ideas, their thoughts, and behaviors aligned to the choices that we make. So, for instance, if I say that Well, let's use a topic that's probably still kind of a hot topic. Let's say that I declare that I am a Republican, and immediately we can see it happening. You can just see it, right? Because as soon as I declare that, I am now taking on the beliefs of that party. Not only from my standpoint, but from the standpoint of those in that party, as well as the standpoint for the opposing parties. And those may not equate, but I am going to try and stay consistent with that because I've declared it to everybody. Now, see, this idea of consistency shows that there is an externalization here. And what I mean by that is that I can say that all day in the privacy of my own house alone, and it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean anything until somebody else witnesses it. And that's one of the reasons why our private lives are our private lives, because we do a lot of things that you would not do in public. And we've talked about that too. So the minute that I say this is who I am, or this is the group that I'm joining, I'm saying that I need to have some consistency with the beliefs and values of that group. And this can create problems. Okay. Before we get into that, let me talk about, so this is the idea behind accountability and things like accountability partners and other forms of holding other people accountable in like management systems and self-development and these types of things, is because when we tend to declare things, we want to stay consistent. Now, interestingly enough, the declare things publicly accountability idea isn't quite as rife with the amount of consistency that we would think it would be. But the idea here is that when we do these things, we want to remain consistent with those choices from an internal standpoint. Now, what happens is we start, let's say in the case of the political parties. Now, when everybody's being nice and everybody's agreeing that gap is small, we're okay. But the more polarized we get because of disagreements, the more things might start to shift in our values and belief systems. Now, when I start holding on to contradictory beliefs, I start getting what's called cognitive dissonance. And what that is that I'm trying to maintain holding on to two different contradictory belief systems, and it creates mental stress. So I may believe in certain ideals of, say, the Republican Party, but the more that party shifts its values, the less I may believe in what they stand for. However, because I want to remain consistent, I stick with them despite how uncomfortable it gets. And I know a lot of people, well, let's just say I know some people who voted for Trump in the election, not because they wanted to vote for him, but because of the party he's associated with, because this is where you get that vote on the party line thing. So we tend to want to make everything very simple, and it just doesn't do this. So when we experience cognitive dissonance and when we start holding on to these contradictory ideas, we start to feel that mental stress, because we don't necessarily it's not that we may not believe in either of them, but they don't work well together. So it creates stress. And the one thing that we want to do, again, is we want to remain consistent, or we want to be congruent. So we start to do things that might seem rather odd, right? So we see people that do things that we wouldn't expect them to do. And that's because one of the beliefs won out at that point when there was a choice point. So they are inconsistent with their beliefs. And because they're inconsistent, it creates pain. And so we start enacting those defense mechanisms. We rationalize why we did something. We make excuses for why something happened that wasn't something that we normally did. You know, in the realm of behavior, future behavior is probable based on past behavior. So we can look at somebody's past behavior and we can say there's a high probability that that behavior is going to repeat, right? But we can't say it for certain. We can never say it's for certain because there can be something that changes that behavior in real time. And part of that could be cognitive dissonance. It may be because they just are changing their tune, but the fact is that we start to rationalize those behaviors. This is also how we get ourselves into problem areas where we feel guilt or shame, where we engage in confirmation bias, where we start to throw out information that's contradictory to what we're doing. And it just, what it does is just makes our life a lot more interesting is really what it does, because we're in this dance all day long, you know, and it's very hard to balance this out because, you know, even in social settings, when I was talking about being a part of the Republican Party, right? So I'm aligning myself with the group. Now, here's the interesting thing about the paradox of human behavior, or the human, is that we need to belong, and yet we need to be individuals. So we're looking for those places, and it makes things. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but the idea here is that psychologically we want to remain consistent with what we've chosen, especially if it's in more of a public place. That's can explain a lot of interesting group behavior. For instance, social proof and forced compliance. A great example of this is the Ash conformity experiments, and that's where you're seeing the effect of peer pressure. Now, peer pressure we often relate to teenage youth and drinking and doing things you're not supposed to, but we all have this issue, all of us. You can see it in a stadium or a performance of something where there needs to be applause, right? When everybody starts applauding, you automatically start to applaud. You may not even think that it deserves it, but because everybody is applauding, you probably are going to do it. And it may be more of an unconscious thing because it's polite. But in a more anyway, so back to this experiment. What this experiment was about, forced conformity or social conformity, and what it is it's a group of students who were testing their perceptual ability to judge lengths of lines against a static line, right? So that was what it was presented, but the only person being tested was the sixth participant in this panel. So the panel consisted of 6 people, and the first 5 were in on the experiment, and this is what they did. So they would basically, it was like a multiple choice thing. They showed a picture of a line, then they showed lines that were similar, and the group had to pick out which one matched the one picture. And for the first couple of rounds, everybody maintained the correct line, right? But the third round, the first 5 started answering a different one, a one that was obviously not correct. Whether it was longer or shorter, they would choose one of those. And as it got to the sixth person had to make a very tough choice. There was a lot of cognitive dissonance going on because they knew what the right answer was, but then they had to determine whether or not they were going to go against the group. And it was somewhere in the 70 something percentile that they would go with the group, despite the fact that they knew what the correct answer was. And this explains things like, the fake news stuff, why people will staunchly defend something that seems rather odd. You know, they get stuck in this social pressure to conform. And if you think you don't conform, you might want to check that, because there are things that you do naturally, unconsciously, that is conforming to society. So if you run around saying you're a nonconformist, well, you might be to a small extent, but not really. So that's the idea behind consistency and cognitive dissonance. We're trying to stay consistent with our internal world and our behaviors, and then we are often placed in situations where we have conflicting ideas that it causes confusion, and we have to make a decision. And once we make the decision to relieve the pressure, we might have to use some of those defense mechanisms to defend why we did that. So I'm just going to stop right there. We'll be right back with the question of the day, which is going to hit on some of this stuff. And hang on. We'll be right back. Okay. And we're back. And today's question comes from Morva in New Orleans. And Morva asks, why do we hate weirdos? Huh? So what do you think about that? Well, let's dive in. I'm sure you can see already what's going on. The term weirdo, of course, means different, right? We're going to talk about connotation here in just a second, but when we are going out into our world and we're forming our tribes, or we're looking for people to be around in our groups, we are looking for sameness. And there's wherever people group up, there's a spectrum of same to not same. And when we have, and again, this is the paradox of the human animal, really, is that we need to be around people who are like us, but we also need to maintain our individuality within that group. So we want to do that at the same time we create the group identity, which is based on the sameness, and then the group joins groups which has the same issue. It's trying to maintain the group individuality while maintaining the larger group's beliefs and sameness. So when we talk about weirdos, we're talking about those outliers, those people who have either more differences or not enough sameness to really fit in with the core of that group. And we call them outliers. And what we do in that situation is called negative outgroup stereotyping. And what that means is that we have to defend our stance against this, right? It's a very interesting thing. Human beings are not inclusive by nature. We are exclusive. We look for people that are like us and we exclude everybody else. And when we do that, we have to justify why we're doing that. And so one of our mental tricks, one of our one of our mind tricks, the mind is a tricksy thing, is going to place on that person more negative stereotyping so that we can make them less than us. It's a hierarchical move. They can't, since they are not like us, we have to be better than they are. So we make sure that they are worse than us. They are not as human as us. Negative outgroup stereotyping. So you can even see it in the question, the way the question was written. Why do we hate weirdos? Right? Weirdos is already a negative connotated word. It's a label that we use to describe people that we think are beneath us or just out there. That is negative outgroup stereotyping. And the fact that we hate them, right? That is a very emotionally laden term against that person. And don't think that you don't do this, because you do. We all do it. We're always looking for people who are the same, or have the same types of mannerisms and behaviors. And it basically boils down to same equals safe and difference equals danger. And the more differences somebody has, the more we label them with more negative stereotyping. And this is why we have the constant problem with racism, ageism, genderism, any other ism that you can think of is rooted in this cognitive bias of negative outgroup stereotyping. That's why inclusivity is such a very difficult subject to navigate, because no matter where we go with it, we're excluding somebody. And if you think that I'm wrong, you might want to think about that a little bit, because if you are gathering together certain people that are like you, you are automatically distancing yourself and excluding people who are not like you. And I'll leave you to think about that. I hope that answers your question, Morva, and I'm not trying to pick on you, but that's what's going on. That is why we hate weirdos in those words. That is exactly why we have difficulties including people who are different in our social systems, in our established social systems. So thanks again for that. And thank you for listening. Again, ask me questions. If you want to know about what we're talking about, or if you have a question of the day, hit me up at mike@whatdrivesyou.net. I will do my best to answer them. I hope I'm giving you information that is both engaging and interesting, as well as giving you some insight into the humanimal. Because the more we know about the people that we are with and doing things with, the more grace we can extend, the more that we can overcome those exclusive behaviors. So thanks for listening. Thanks again for Jillian. Have a great week. Bye-bye.